Artnerds. Today we are checking out something super tiny and cute that I think is really going to rock your world. So what is inside this tiny little package and why are you going to be super excited with it? Well, you're just going to have to watch to find out. So recently I have been reviewing a lot of small portable painting apparatuses from the Portable Painter Micro to the Superior Collapsible Watercolor Cup. We've been talking about a lot of travel watercolor stuff. But you know, the one thing I've never really talked about a whole lot is travel watercolor paper, or things you can actually paint on. We have talked about blocks to an extent, but what I'm going to show you today is a really cute way to discreetly bring your watercolor paintings with you anywhere you go. So I ordered this petite package from Zulily a few weeks ago and it finally came in. And if you guys hang out on Instagram and you enjoy tiny things, you've probably seen something similar to this online. It's made by 3x3 and it asks if you've worn any good books lately. I've paid about $8 for this. And what this is it is a necklace book with replaceable pages. You can probably find these elsewhere, but this was the first time I'd seen one for sale. So I definitely wanted to order one, and I figured from the get-go that I would replace its pages with something a little bit more in keeping with the kind of art I like to make. So let's see if I can get it out of this super duper tiny adorable envelope. Haha! It's directional. This one comes with a long chain, although you could replace it. Although this would also be handy if you were like field painting, since you could just slip it off. And it has a small elastic clasp, like a hair elastic. And inside we have some really cheap paper. But that's okay. We didn't buy this for the paper. We bought this for the fact that you can put whatever paper you want in this teeny tiny book. So what I'm going to do with this paper is I'm going to use it as, and this is like printer paper, this is the cheapest paper. I swear they could have done better 3x3. I'm going to replace this. You could replace it with like drawing paper if you wanted to. I'm going to try and find a suitable cotton rag watercolor paper that I can put in this teeny tiny book. So when selecting a paper for this book, we have some considerations to keep in mind. I like a textured watercolor paper, so a hot press that is too smooth is just not going to work. We also want to aim for papers that will function on both sides. It doesn't have to be great on both sides, but just the format of this teeny tiny book and how small this is means I don't necessarily want to paint on just one side of the paper. We also need a paper that's not too thick. So 300-pound watercolor paper is probably out for this one. So we could use a 90-pound student grade cellulose paper. That's going to be single-sided, and with something this small, I want to at least try to get some like neat little wet into wet blends, because the name of the game is mostly like get your main shapes in and then later on add details. So I have some likely contenders here. We have Fluid 100, it's a 140-pound watercolor paper, a very mild-mannered cotton rag paper. We have Shizen Hot Press, which is a very mild-mannered hot press paper. It's got a little bit of texture, but not a whole lot. So it's somewhere in between a hot press and a cold press in terms of watercolor paper. And we have the Baohang Academy watercolor pad, which I recently reviewed. This is also a 140-pound watercolor paper, but I found in my review that this is thinner than many other 140-pound papers on the market. There's a couple of ways we could decide which paper is going to be our best paper. We can just cut one, put it in, and try it. We can cut a sheet from each, fold it, and try it, or we can just try it. What I think I want to do is I think I want to cut a sheet from each and try it like that. I think that's going to be the best method. And shoot, I may decide that I like having different papers in this little book because it gives me some options. Now, this thing is so tiny, when shut at best, we're gonna get maybe like 2 millimeters in there. Quite frankly, with watercolor paper, it might literally be 2 sheets folded in half. What I'm thinking though is that we could do 1 sheet from each, and that would work. So what this is gonna require is it's gonna require a little bit of cutting. And I actually want my watercolor paper a little bit bigger than my template. And something else I want to do is I actually want to wipe this thing down with rubbing alcohol because it feels like there's a little bit of like maybe manufacturing or factory grease on this. Like it wasn't cleaned off before it was sent out. And I definitely want to finish removing this sticker if possible. So I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to remove 1 sheet of watercolor paper from each of my pads. So not only did I wash this off with rubbing alcohol, but I also soaked it in some dish soap and rinsed it off just to try to remove this really terrible, awful sticker residue. This is going to tear up paper. I got to do something about this. But also, again, to remove any of like factory grease that might still be left on the product. Now, while this dries, I thought we could kind of test out our papers, because what we're looking for is a paper where we can paint on both sides of the paper. And I mean, look at this, look, so little. We could definitely paint on 1/2 of the paper on each side and still have the whole other half to use for our book. So to test this out, I am going to use Sennelier's test palette, because why not? And this is very similar to the size of palette a lot of people use when they go out into the field, like a little Altoids tin, except this is a ginger mint tin. So I have the Baohang, I have the Fluid 100, and I have the Shizen hot press all the way at the bottom. We'll do this one at a time, and basically on, let me give myself a guide marker. Actually, the Baohang seems pretty promising. The back texture seems about as prominent as the front texture. And I know there are some double-sided paper like Canson's Moulin de Roy. But I have a giant pad of that, and I just did not want to cut that one down. So I'm spritzing a little bit of water onto my paint. Give them a chance to activate. Now, what I'm going to be looking for on both sides of the paper is wet into wet blending. So we're going to start with the fronts, and hopefully as each piece dries, I can kind of get started on the back, so that way we're not spending, 4 hours doing this. All right, so we're going to start with the Baohang, and I'm just going to grab a regular watercolor brush. I'm not a big fan of travel brushes. They just hurt my hands. So this is the front, and I already did the field test for this, completed it just the other night, in fact. So I know this is a pretty good paper. I didn't pick any papers I thought might not work for this. So first test is wet into wet. And that is the front of the Baohang. Next, we're going to do the front side of Fluid 100. Fluid 100 is very similar in that the back seems to have a similar texture to the front. And that is the Fluid 100. Already it's a little less promising than the Baohang. So this is the Baohang. We get really nice granulation, nice movement. Not nearly as nice on the Fluid 100, at least in my opinion. And then the front of the Shizen hot press. And of course this is all going to depend on what you're looking for. And maybe I'm taking too much inspiration from some of the artists I've seen on Instagram who do micro paintings, because I'm thinking of these like landscapes in miniature with beautiful sunsets and sunrises and teeny tiny trees. And perhaps that is not what I will paint at all. Alright, and that is the front of our Shizen. So Shizen, Fluid 100, and then the Baohang. Okay, so it took a while, but the fronts have finally, for the most part, dried. I'm going to flip them over and now test out how well they can handle a little bit of watercolor on the back. I'm not expecting 100% perfection here, but I do want to see that I can use the back in addition to the front. So since I paint watercolor comics, I do actually paint pretty small. Some panels can be, you know, fairly tiny compared to how large some people paint. But micro painting is not something I've done a whole lot of. I've done a couple of videos here on the channel, but really more as a challenge than, you know, a serious attempt at making something I might like. But I thought this could be a good way for me to try this actually. The Baohang, which is the one we're using right now, handled okay. It's alright. It's not as nice as the front, and I'll compare it when it's dried. But it does I'm not like sitting here like, oh, that handled like the back of paper. Next is the Fluid 100. Same thing. So I thought this could be a good way for me to just kind of make more art in general and make more art for me personally, because I find that I'm making a lot of art either to share here on YouTube or to share on Twitter or for Instagram, or it just goes straight into the book. The Fluid 100 on the back handled pretty similarly to on the front, maybe a little bit more wet into wet bleeding, but I wouldn't say it's like noticeably different or noticeably bad. And then finally the Shizen. And I think this is going to handle pretty much the same back and front, because I think I have accidentally painted on the back of Shizen hot press many times. But what with working on 7-inch Cara Volume 2 and getting the book ready, and then we went immediately into laying out the Lilliputian Living Compendium, I just haven't really been making any personal work, and certainly not any personal watercolor or watercolor studies. Alright, so this is the Shizen. This is the Fluid 100, getting a lot more movement. And then this is the Baohang, or Baohang. Let me very carefully move these over. I don't know why I'm always off center. And I'll let these dry as well. Okay, so the backs are mostly dry. They're still a little damp. It is a damp day outside today, so I'm not surprised. I feel like the backs took a little bit longer than the fronts to dry, but that's also probably because I wet the fronts, and then as soon as they were surface to touch dry, I wet the backs. So none of them are like exceptionally bad on the back. I think all of them are serviceable on the back. I think the Baohang is going to be the one I probably go with, or maybe a mixture of Baohang and Shizen. Fluid 100 is fine, but I think it works better in other situations, like painting faces, than it does in this instance. So I want to go ahead and just do some smaller, tighter details on the front. And then I'll do that on the back as well, just to see if it can handle both wet into wet washes and tighter details. My goal with this is really like sketches, but also just practicing economy of line and economy of expression, since that's something I kind of struggle with. You know, being able to convey an idea with like the minimum amount of effort put in or work put in, but keep it still beautiful. Because I think one of the things I really struggle with is I tend to overwork things, especially in watercolor. And I tend not to trust my gut. So I'm also kind of hoping this will force me to do that. And I'm going to do the same test on the back as well after these have had a chance to dry. So from right to left, Fluid 100, Baohang, Shizen. So these are probably still wet, but they are dry enough that we can hopefully flip them over and try the same thing on the opposite side. I do think the fronts definitely perform better than the backs, but it's difficult to find papers that are good on both sides. And this isn't really a paper review anyway. On that note though, I have reviewed all 3 of these papers here on this channel. So if you are on the market for good watercolor papers, one of these could be it. I'm a big fan of the Shizen myself, and I was very pleasantly surprised by the Baohang watercolor paper. Fluid 100 is just kind of a standard trooper. It works pretty well. And all 3 of them are pretty affordable for watercolor paper. So if you'd like to do a little bit more painting, if you want to practice more, these are all economical cotton rag papers that might just be what you're looking for. These are some crummy little trees here, but I think you guys get the gist. So all of them seem to hold details at least decently well on both sides. So that's pretty promising. Like I said, I think I am not going to use the Fluid 100 in our little mini book. It's a little bit too thick. It's a little bit too sturdy for what I'm really looking for. So I think I'm going to use a combination of the Baohang and the Shizen. Now the problem is, look at this. I've already got some migration on my paper. How did that even happen? So I'm going to let this dry. Actually, you know what? Don't even have to do that because I'm going to cut the bottoms off anyway. So I am not great at cutting straight lines, so I'm just using this to cut our tests off so that they're not wet and getting in the way. And I'm going to use a large, ooh, you get chewy. don't want to cut through the shizen. I'm going to use a paper cutter. That could be a reason not to use the shizen, is that it might be difficult to cut. Could use an X-Acto blade for that, but I'm going to use, like I keep trying to say, I'm going to use a paper cutter for it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make a template on this paper, and I want to do it on my straight edges. So I'm going to use the Baohang, or the Baohang, and I'm going to grab, I had a ruler, and I picked it up, and I don't know where I put it. And that's the story of my studio. Not a studio. Alright, well, I guess I will find said ruler and return to you guys, and we'll do a little bit of measuring, because I want my paper to be bigger than this. That's P90. Haha, I return with a ruler. Let's actually see how big this little thing is. This little, let's not use that. This is not my favorite ruler, by the way. It's just a little bit, it's looking like 2 1/4 inches for my friends who are still in the Imperial system. And I'm going to go ahead and use this anyway, even though it's got yellow on it, because that's fine. I'm going to go for 2 1/2, and then I'm going to mark 1 1/4. That's going to be our midpoint. And I don't know how I neglected to measure how tall it is, but it looks like it's just a smidge-a-rooney over 1 1/2. Teeny tiny paper, teeny tiny paper. Let's go with 1 3/4. Living wild. I know, overkill much, but we moved and I can't find my small Carl paper cutter, so I gotta use this huge tonic one instead. So we have our marks made on the paper, so really all we have to do is line them up and cut them. Now, I don't know about you guys, I can't cut a straight line to save my life. So a paper cutter where I can line it up at the top and line it up on the straight edge over here is super helpful for me. Even with a paper cutter, can't seem to cut a straight line. So as predicted, the Shizen does not want to cut. Let's see if we can help it out a little bit. All those tough handmade fibers that make it work so well as a watercolor paper. Maybe not super well as a crafter's paper. I don't know. I mostly just use it for painting. This is my first time cutting Shizen paper. So I drew the lines down the middle on these because I suspect these things will not fold without a fight. So let's see if I can actually utilize this thing. Probably not. I probably have to get out a cutting mat. And what I want to do is I just want to score that middle line. I don't want to cut all the way through. That defeats the purpose. But, oh, I should cut on the side that's going to be on the outside. Okay, well, let's decide that this is going to be the side on the outside then. Oh, give me a break. Hold still. Okay. All right. You want to be stubborn? Fine. You don't make unpopular art videos on the internet for 2016, 4 years without being very stubborn. Stubborn might be my middle name. And this ruler sucks. Just to be real. Okay, so we're just looking to score it. We're not looking to cut all the way through. Ha! Ha ha! Ha ha! Ha 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 ha! Yes! Oh, success! It's so nice when a plan goes according to plan. But I'm going to alternate them, actually. You know, get complicated with it. Cuts so much easier with an X-Acto blade. There we go. All that's left is to A, cap our knife, proper knife safety. Don't want to be flailing that around. And then B, alternate our pages. And the texture is distinct enough that I don't think I'll have a problem telling. Oh, they're a chunky little thing, aren't they? All right, let's go get our book. Okay, so I put a little piece of washi tape because scrub as I might, I couldn't get all the goo off. And I know such things as Goo Gone exist. Okay. Flop it through. Okay, okay. All right, so downside. This is not going to shut. Of course not. Of course not. Does it have to shut? You know, does it have to shut? Nah, it doesn't have to shut. Now, what would be handy is a little rubber band right here just so that it's not forever open, or I could use a little clip, and that would be helpful too because I could use the clip to hold the book open later. A little clip like one of these. How cute would the tiny bulldog clip be? Ugh, so cute. Sorry. I make comics about tiny people, to be fair. One could also just clip this and leave it kind of free floating. As cute as this would be, it's not actually big enough to hold it closed. Actually, none of them are big enough, so does it even matter? Does it even matter? Probably not. Teeny tiny clip. It's like Kara's painting in the book. I can't help myself. Now, the other downside is painting on these pages, you definitely need a clip. Because that elastic, and I would re-thread the elastic which is actually supposed to, will it work? This, this book is so chunky. Okay, that's a lot of strain on that. Wonder how other people are doing these on the internets. I wants to know. You know what? It was $8. It's a good start. Doesn't have to be a perfect start. Yep. Can also use these to hold your tiny little pages in place. How cute. Sorry. I'm such a sucker for like tiny little things. Again, I make a comic about tiny people. Now, maybe what I'll do is just use this to hold this in place and not even care about the cover. Just give up on the cover. There. Ready to paint, y'all. But I actually had one more thing. Let me put this down to protect the paper. One more thing I wanted to do, and that is personalize it, because it looks kind of plain. And they didn't even bother to like put something on the front. But clearly this is not the one the people on the internet are using. So if you guys know which is the one the people on the internet are using, please let me know down in the comments below. Do I have to make one? Do I have to like get in the leather working? I don't want to do that. I'd rather just give someone money rather than start a completely new hobby that I've never ever done before. You know, having more fun decorating it than I probably will using it. It's very tiny and very cute and would make a good prop. And I kind of want to take it off this stupid necklace and just put it on a keychain. Always be decorating my stuff, I guess, with stickers. And you're probably like, Becca, you make stickers. Why aren't you using your stickers? That's because my stickers are still packed away somewhere in a box in the back of a closet while we shop for a house. Because this is a rental. This isn't even my house. I can't even put things on the walls. I'm not a fan of that as an artist. I would like to put things on the walls. Going back to the always be decorating. Alright, that's cute enough. That's cute enough. That's fine. Okay, so clearly this thing is not the one that people on Instagram are using. That or their photography foo is way stronger than mine. But it was still a fun little project, fairly inexpensive, and I figured out some papers that might work in this little thing. There are definitely some pros and cons to the, what is this? The 3x3 necklace book with replaceable pages. There's definitely some pros and cons to that, and I'm sure there are people like on Etsy who make these to sell and are doing a way better job than this. But I just kind of wanted to play around with the concept. I wanted to see if this is something that could maybe work for me without investing a whole bunch of money. And I thought it would just be kind of a fun DIY project. You can probably find these little notebooks at like arts and crafts stores, like maybe you can find them at Michael's. I don't go into the jewelry section super often, so I don't necessarily know. And you guys will just have to keep an eye on my Instagram to see how much I like this thing. It sure does take some stinking cute photos though, doesn't it? Like I have this miniature palette it's a children's like keyring palette. You can get them a lot of different places. And I like popped out the little paint pucks inside and filled it with some of my favorite Magello paints. And so these two together are just stupid cute. And then I've got all these mini clips. And I also have these teeny tiny glass jars from Dollar Tree, which could work for holding the water. I mean, you could get real ridiculous with this, and I feel like I'm probably gonna get real ridiculous with this. So something else I thought about is just using a hair elastic just to hold this thing closed in transit, because when I'm wearing it like this, it just wants to flop open all over the place. I probably need to find a better way to hold it closed, and I'm definitely going to need to include a clip just to hold it open on the side also, because that is way cuter. Duh. Yeah, sure, it works. Is it like the best solution? No. Do you want to do it like this? Probably not. Find your own. You could use like a tiny little leather band or a rubber band or something. It doesn't really matter. So the papers that I'm using inside of this ridiculous thing are the Baohang Academy watercolor paper. So it's a 140-pound watercolor paper, but it's a thinner 140-pound. And both sides handle, you can tell this is the back, it doesn't handle quite as nice as the front over here, but you can still paint on it decently well, and I don't know that anybody who didn't know would know the difference. And then Shizen, this is the front of the Shizen hot press, this is the back. Similar situation, again, I don't think people would necessarily know the difference. So it was really fun hanging out with you guys and making this, or repurposing really, this tiny ridiculous thing. This thing is also heavy. It's got like a door hinge on it. I don't know why it has like a super hefty hinge, but it does. This little heavy little chomper, you could like fight back with this thing. Don't, but you could. And then none of the edges are like rounded off, so like this is a dangerous little thing. Anyway, it'll be fun taking out in the backyard, playing around with it, seeing how I like it. I am not going to do the miniature brushes thing, because even though that is ridiculously cute, and I've even got some old brushes that I could like scrap for that if I wanted to, I have arthritis, and that is not me. So I'll probably do like a water brush or a regular smaller paintbrush, like a detail brush, something like that, just for me, you know, like for my hand size. But you could cut them down and do that. There's also people online who sell probably all of these things, which would make this almost moot, right? But like I said, it was fun hanging out with you guys. It was a fun little project, and it's not a bad idea. And there's all sorts of things you can repurpose as mini watercolor palettes. You can use makeup compacts. Like you can go to Dollar Tree and pry that makeup up and just fill it with your favorite paints, and then you end up with this really compact little palette. That is not what I did here. Like I said, this is like a children's toy mini watercolor palette, and I pried out the paints and I just put like a little drop in each. But you could also use a pill container and fill the segments in with paint. You can use an Altoids tin, you can use a mint tin. I mean, you don't have to buy, I put it away already, but you don't have to, oh, there it is. You don't have to buy something like the micro painter, which I've reviewed on the channel. It's cute, but like there's a million other alternatives for like cute travel watercolor. And then, I mean, you could even bring something like this. Now, again, this is glass. A plastic one would be better. And shoot, on a necklace like this, you could even just like attach it as a charm. You know what I mean? Like you could put a little chain around the top with a couple jump rings and then just attach it. You could wear your watercolor studio with you everywhere you go. I mean, why not? Just like totally misfrizzle this thing. Hey everybody, I'm an artist. I totally want you to ask me like a million questions while I'm painting, because that doesn't make me terribly nervous. But anyway, so thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. This was a fun one for me. I hope it was a fun one for you guys, and I hope to see you guys again really soon. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye!